I know we're going to talk about a lot today.
Yeah.
And yeah, but so let's kickstart things with just a few questions that don't involve like a crazy amount of adversity and drama. And as we release this show, we're releasing it in November, which there's all kinds of elections and drama going on right now,
Oh
right?
man. Yeah.
But
Wow.
so you've worn many hats. You've been a musician, pastor. I see guitars in the background. Sounds like you got some motorcycles in the garage, that kind of
Yep.
thing. But tell us about you, man. What you're doing now, and then what I want to do is talk about how you grew up.
Yeah. So what I do now primarily is walking alongside high-performing men, typically men of faith, and helping them recalibrate what it is that they say that they want. So one of my taglines is, I keep high-performing men from sacrificing their soul on the altar of their success, and that's something that really rings true for me. So walking alongside, again, high-performing men, also pastors and men in ministry or men transitioning from ministry, entrepreneurs, small business owners, all the way up to corporations, C-suite executives, and really helping them calibrate what they know and what they do into what they feel and experience. So it's been a privilege. We've built a fairly robust business structure that's allowed us to diversify into some other things as well, so that we can kind of spread that portfolio. It's been a wild ride. It's been a great ride, and so that's primarily what I do right now. Who I am, and I'm a man that is doing his best to be the man that he says that he is, and to fulfill the call that I believe God's placed on my life, which includes being a leader, being a husband, being a father. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk to us. First of all. Let's start with your childhood. What was it like growing up for you? Maybe your own relationship with your parents, especially your father, siblings, the whole nine yards.
Oh man. So my parents divorced early on. They divorced when I was 4. I went to live with my mom for a while due to some situations and circumstances. My father gained full custody of us in the end of my 4th grade year. And so everything changed for us at the end of my 4th grade year, and went to live with my dad. As a single dad, he worked a lot. I mean, you couldn't outwork my dad. You still can't. The guy's a machine. And so as a single parent, we grew up in a single bedroom trailer for a lot of my childhood with him. Didn't know any different. Didn't know that it was, not the norm. Grew up on land, so we had 12 acres. Fairly rural upbringing, right? We didn't watch TV, but we did wrestle a lot of goats. And my relationship with my dad was great for what it was. My grandparents did a great deal of raising us. They stepped in because my dad worked so much. He was the manager of a grocery store at the time. Later when I was in high school, he ended up purchasing a feed store that he still runs now. So because he worked 6, sometimes 7 days a week, we would catch the bus from my grandparents' house. We would catch it home to my grandparents' house. We were with them on the weekends. We traveled with them when they would take us to Colorado. They might go hunting with my grandfather every fall, right around this time. It's about to be deer season. And so it was beautiful. It was, I think, being raised, again, not that my dad didn't. He did a great job in providing and did a great job being there when he could. But it was different being raised by grandparents. It's just a different experience, and it's one that I am eternally grateful for. My grandfather, who passed away in 2013, I miss him every day because he's just one of the most true to himself, virtuous men who was not without his own humanity, but did such a great job of modeling just a robust and masculine man, but 2, a man who was full of empathy and a true there you are, not here I am person. who was always dedicated to the person in front of him, who again was just a hard worker. I grew up in his shop, working on wood, building things. They had a half-acre garden. We grew up all of our own vegetables. From the time it was in the summers, we spent the summers with them. So from the time it was daybreak until evening, you didn't see us. We were out. We were outside, my younger brother and I, who is 2.5 years younger than me. We were out on our bicycles. We were in the creek. We were catching crawdads. We were catching fish. We were getting into all types of trouble, carving out the inside of evergreen trees and making forts. It was a different kind of living. I didn't have a computer, bro. I didn't have a computer until I went to college. Right? Like that's not who we were. And small town in Oklahoma. And so it was not normal to what my friends knew, but it was normal to my experience. It's beautiful.
Sounds like your grandfather was a big part of your life.
Oh my gosh, man. Listen, the deacon of the Baptist church that I was raised in. He was the guy that I get asked a lot why I wake up so early. Right? Like, why you wake up at 4 or 3:45? Why? And I want to say like, well, I'm just disciplined and, you just got to win the morning and win the day and all this other self-help, self-motivational stuff that everybody wants to spew. And I don't think that's wrong or unuseful. I think for me, one, we just got up really early as kids to go to my grandparents' house to catch the bus because my dad was usually at work by 6:30. So we were up really early. And then two, like my grandfather, like by the time we got there at like 6, he had already been up praying, reading a scripture, praying for the church prayer list, writing out his to-do list, which was really just a list that my grandmother put on the fridge every night so that he knew what he was going to be doing that day, which I can really appreciate. And by the time we got there, he was just sitting on the kitchen counter. Like there was a step up, so he would sit on the kitchen counter because he was tall, like unlike me. He was like 6'2", 6'3", and at any rate, he would be reading the morning paper, coffee in his hand, every morning. So for me, there was just this. There was this life that was modeled out. It wasn't talked about. It wasn't put on display. It wasn't shared on social media as a way to create productivity. It was just life. And I was really fortunate to have that modeled for me every day.
That is really cool, my man. I had a pretty incredible grandfather myself growing up. Mm-hmm. He was a man's man.
Yep.
Blue collar worker, drove an 18-wheeler truck, but same thing. There you are. Not here I am.
Yeah.
He was one of those guys that he didn't fake charisma. Like he was charisma. And I think looking back on it, he was one of those guys that it didn't matter how crowded the room was. If he was talking to you, you were the most important person in the room.
That's it.
And the cool thing too is, speaking of grandfathers, like he really was the example of how to love your woman. Because my grandfather was tough. He was rough. Mm-hmm. But he was also like, would look at my grandmother even at 73 years old and rub her hand and be like, I love you. You're so beautiful. Like every day, several times a day. It was just like, and as a kid growing up, being around that, I was like, it's kind of cool. But now, the age that you're at, the age that I'm at, like some of those lessons, you look back on them, you're like, those were priceless.
Yeah. And they were caught, right? Like they weren't even taught. And I think that's what's so fascinating is like, in the space that we find ourselves, right, there's so much that we're trying to teach as we live it out, which creates this real dissonance of, am I doing this because this is what I feel that I'm called to do and this is the man that I am, or am I doing this to portray an image for a marketing platform? Like that's where it can get really dissonant when I see things. So for me, I'm very grateful, much like I'm sure you are, that this isn't something so much as I'm trying to experience from the standpoint of reading about it. It's something that was really modeled to me that honestly sometimes I take for granted. I don't, growing up and working on cars and riding horses and doing all of these things that we attribute to this kind of rustic man's man masculinity that having a garage full of bikes that I can work on because I've been a licensed mechanic since I was 18, because I got a job wrenching on cars when I was 16 and just worked my way up. It is interesting to me that that's not the norm for people. Like, I really do sometimes take that for granted. Wait, you didn't grow up just working on stuff with your grandpa? You didn't grow up not having two sticks to rub together. So if anything broke, you couldn't hire anybody to fix it. Like, you just had to figure it out, which again is not a good or bad thing. It's not some sort of elevated position. I just really am grateful for the men that I have in my life. And again, not without their demons, not without their struggles. We could talk about the flip side of the coin, and we could talk about the lack of affection and the lack of kind of emotion. We could talk about some of the anger issues. We could talk about all of that, because that's a real flip side of the coin. That's a real thing. But for me, the good outweighs all of that, right? And it helps to balance kind of the humanity of the experience as well.
Now, you've been through your own fair share of adversity yourself.
Sure.
So the walk has not always been pretty for you.
No.
What's happened in your life over the past several years?
Oh, that's a fair question. I think from starting with the loss of my grandfather in 2013, I stepped into ministry at 19. So I was a pastor or on pastoral staff for 13 years. And I wasn't prepared for it. I will say that. I will say that I stepped in because I fit a need, and I loved helping people. And I am naturally charismatic. I am naturally outgoing. I love being on a stage. Like, all of those things played into the fact that I was and I had a heart to help people. So all of that played into stepping into a mega church at the end of my 18th year of living and really fitting a model of what could be useful. And so that was all that was required. And that's not a good or bad thing. It was just the way that it was. And so I got put into a platform that I wasn't prepared for. And emotionally, I wasn't prepared for it. Spiritually, I wasn't prepared for it. But I was good at it. And I was good enough to fake it. And not fake my faith, but again, fake experience that I didn't have. And I share that because it led to a career of never feeling adequate and becoming this extreme yes man who said yes to everything and everyone, because if you really knew me and you really knew how unqualified I was, and if you really knew how much I didn't know what I was doing, and I don't have faith figured out, and I don't have all this figured out, and I don't come from the right kind of background or the right kind of family or the right side of town. But if I can just convince you that I'm indispensable, and if I can just work really hard, and if I can just take on more positions, we need a website, cool, I'll learn how to build a website. We need graphic design, I'll learn how to do that. We need to write liturgy, cool, I'll take all these prayer books and all these study manuals and I'll compile it all and I'll do it. We need a men's pastor, I got it. We need a student pastor, I got it. We need a college pastor, I'll build it. Like, just kept saying yes, and created this really, really dark dissonance in my life, which I think a lot of men can relate to. Specifically, I know a lot of men in ministry can relate to this, having lost 6 friends over the past 7 years to suicide in ministry. Part of the reason I do what I do. There is this extreme feeling of lack and of not being good enough. And so we pile on the accolade and we pile on the job, and we're constantly trying to keep up and reconcile the fact that we don't really know and we don't feel good enough. And so that out of that adversity that was all internal, and we can talk about external, and we will, but that led to some closet addictions, right? Like, we can talk about the closet addiction to alcohol, right? And the fact that I drank every single day.
Yeah, you struggled with that? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Drank every day, drank every night. And it wasn't to it like here's the deal. I didn't think that I had a problem because I wasn't getting wasted. I was just drinking enough every day to not feel the extreme anxiety.
Do you
But
drink now?
no,
Okay. Just
no.
how long you been without
Stone
alcohol?
cold sober since so I made the decision on Christmas of last year that I just wasn't going to drink, period. So I think I'm like 9 months and 4 days, I think is what it is. Like if we talk days.
But who's
Uh,
counting?
right, right. I have an app that tells me every day. I think I'm like day 288.
Yeah.
And even then, it wasn't that I was drinking a lot. It was that this doesn't serve me in any capacity. And drinking socially or going to masterminds and drink, like it just, I'm the guy, if I have one, why not have two or three? Right. And so, like, just to elevate the experience, I'm funnier. I'm even more outgoing. People love it. And really, what it cost me was memories. What it cost me was time. What it cost me was experiences. What it cost me was intimacy. And so, again, but never thought I had a problem because I wasn't just getting plastered every day. It was just enough to numb it every day. And
And you
so,
know, and I don't want to cut you off, but I'm going
please,
to real quick, just because I think what you're saying here is so profound. You're speaking to a lot of people.
yeah,
I don't get wasted every day. And like I grew up, my mom unfortunately just really struggled with alcohol, and her big thing was, well, I don't drink every day.
mm-hmm,
She drank like after a while it was every day, but it was just like, but when she did drink, which was pretty often, it was still several times a week. But when she did, man, boom, it was like it was
yeah,
on, right?
yeah,
And I think we really have to analyze, and it sounds like you did the exact same thing. It's like, okay, I could have an excuse that I don't drink every day, so on paper I don't have a problem. Not to say you
right,
did have a problem, but I think we really need to think about it as you did. It was like,
yeah,
okay, not getting hammered, but how is this
yeah,
serving me? Sounds like it wasn't. And how is this impacting me? Like, what
right,
is the impact? Even if I'm not getting drunk and I'm struggling with a hangover the next day physically and mentally, like, still, how is just this little bit or a
right,
decent amount of alcohol, what
sure,
is it doing to me?
yeah. Well,
And
and socially, when I would go out, like I played music a lot. I played music, I toured, I traveled, I played in bars a lot, and you got people just buying you drinks, buying you shots, doing all. So when I would drink out in public, mind you, in ministry, like it would get out of hand. Um, Now the communities that I were part of, they were a little bit more liberal towards the drinking side. So it wasn't that it was, but it created even more dissonance within me. Like I'm a fraud, I'm a failure, like this is messy, which would then lead me to drink more to cope with the idea that I was drinking. Right? You see how like it just creates this really weird, and it's self-justifying, right? And you just keep the secret and you keep the secret. And you mix that with an extreme addiction to affirmation and to needing to feel accepted and needing to feel like you're doing a good job and needing to feel that validation. It's just a recipe for disaster. And again, there were times that I got just incredibly wrecked. Like an ambulance being called when like my son's mom was like 38 weeks pregnant and I am just inebriated on a bathroom floor, right? And I can remember EMTs coming into my house and laughing at me. And one saying, "Isn't he a pastor?" And the dissonance, right? And never having the awareness to know like, hey, something emotionally is not okay. Like the alcohol or being an alcoholic or labeling yourself as something, like that's a symptom, right? Like this isn't a thing in and of itself. There's something more that's going on here. Like there's something that I'm trying to escape from. There's something there's something I'm not dealing with. In 2015, I walked through a divorce, and which was painful in and of itself. Over the course of the 6 months to a year of finalizing that entire process, I also lost 8 different family members and friends, and all to very, very traumatic, violent death. I mean, we're talking, murder, sexual assault, suicide, motorcycle accidents, and leading all those funerals and leading all those services while still being in ministry, while, even walking through a divorce, still being in ministry, putting on the face, doing the thing because the affirmation addiction is still there. Yet I'm ramping up the drinking a little bit because there's so much trauma coming at me. I actually don't know how to even process one of the things. Seems like every other month someone's dying and I'm leading a funeral, and it's not somebody in the church. It's like family. It's a niece, it's a sister, it's a best friend, it's a mentor, it's an aunt. And finally my body just gave out. Like, I'm fine. My body's like, no, I'm not fine. So I ended up going through sepsis, and my body just shut down. Hormonal shutdown, thyroid scramble, a thyroid storm, hospitalized. And it was then that, losing 25 pounds in a matter of days, them telling my family I'm dying, my body's rejecting itself, that I came conscious, and I grabbed my little IV bag, walked to the bathroom in this very dramatic moment. And I looked at myself and I'm like, dude, are you gonna have to die? Like, is this who you want your son to be? Son was like 1. Like, is this what you want for your life? Like, you're killing yourself for what? Who's come to see you in the hospital? Who? Any of the people that you're killing yourself for? No. And I think that's when it hit me. It's not that what I was doing was not useful. Just recognize that I was sacrificing my soul on the altar of a ministry that I don't even know that I was necessarily, I loved it. It was a beautiful season of my life. I was a youth pastor for 10 years. I loved it. I just don't know that I wasn't propping up my ladder on someone else's building. And I recognize I've got to step out because I'm going to end up killing myself because I need to figure out some things for myself. And so I did. And I recognized that God wasn't done with me per se, but what I was doing wasn't working. And I needed to change the scenery. I needed to be able to lead people in a way that I felt was more effective. I needed to be able to walk alongside men in a way that I hadn't been walked alongside, but I needed to get myself there first. And so that's where Embrace the Lion was born. So I stepped out of ministry. I'd love to say I started a business and it was super successful and it was just this rags to riches story. Nah, dude, I was in this 2,500 square foot house by myself, my son every other week, single dad, building a business that wasn't, but I didn't have money to start the business. So I didn't have a job anymore, stepped out of ministry. So I was just making it work. I was flipping Harleys, which means you buy them low, not running, fix them up, repaint them, do the stuff, flip them. I was cutting hair because I've been a licensed barber since I was 19. So I was cutting hair out of my front room. I was building websites. I was doing graphic design. I was leading team calls on organizational development and leadership. All the things that I'd done in ministry, really were the backbone of how I made it and created sustainability. So I'll say always that the pulpit was preparation for the true platform that God had planned. But it was messy, man. It was messy.
Talk to us about the imposter syndrome you must have felt.
Oh, must have felt, or still at times do feel. Right. I think
let's talk about being at the bowels of this, right? Like the very bottom of this.
Yeah.
To where even as you painted that pictures of the EMTs going there and they're laughing, isn't this guy a pastor?
Yeah.
And there had to be that part of you that heard that, right? And you're like, And then all those questions of when you were drinking, when you're doing these things kind of bottomed out. And then you're like, was there ever a part of you obviously there was a part of you that's just who am I? And then maybe number 2, was there ever a struggle with your faith? Hey, look, I'm a pastor. I'm here for you, man. I'm on the front lines for you, God. Why the challenges?
That's a really, really beautiful question, and one that I've not really been asked in that frame. So I'm really excited to talk about this because I think it's going to be really helpful. there was such a dissonance and a shame. There was a real shame as to who I felt I was and who I said I was. And that shame only amplified and magnified through the divorce and through the loss. I was really good at wearing a mask. I was really good at putting on a show. I was really good at being all things to all people. Like I naturally am a there you are person. And so long as I can focus on your frustrations and trauma, I don't have to focus on my own. And the church for as much as I loved that season, so long as you're fulfilling that role, nobody really asks. There isn't a lot of accountability to that. Which I find really, again, having lost so many friends in ministry to suicide, like I'm not, that's not just a caveat, caveat statement. That's a true statement. There's not a lot of check-in on the mental health side because we just put a Band-Aid of prayer, or we think we have accountability when we have house churches or small groups, all these things. But when you're in ministry, like, you still have to show up on. And you still have to show up as the leader. And there is this unwritten rule that you share, but you share within a threshold of your experience because you are still the leader. And so there's this immense amount of pressure that some do really well with, right? Like, I'm not saying that like all pastors are struggling or all have this real dissonant view of their experience. I just know that for the majority that I've been connected with, that's a real thing. And it's something we just don't talk about. We don't talk about the struggles of faith when you are in the throes of all of this and you're praying all the right prayers and you feel like that's where the dissonance comes. Like you feel like, I'm doing all the things, I'm doing more. Like, what gives? Like, when am I going to experience like getting out of the mental trash? And for some that comes and for some it doesn't, right? And for me, stepping out and then stepping into what I do now, the frame is a bit different because I'm able to share more like this, where in ministry I wouldn't have been able to. And so that's cathartic in and of itself. And that's helpful and useful. And make no mistake, this isn't just in ministry. I walk alongside men who are in business who feel like complete frauds, who feel like failures, who feel like it's not even a lack of gratitude. It's like, I have everything. I'm living what everybody else considers the dream. I have what everybody considers to be the perfect family. I have what everybody considers to be the perfect faith. Like, why do I feel like a total POS? Why do I feel stressed all the time? Why do I feel anxious all the time? Why do I not know what I believe half the time? Why do I struggle with thoughts of, would it be better if I'm just not here? Like, getting really dark and really honest. Like, you feel shame for feeling that. Like, I don't even deserve to feel this way, which creates another level of shame and depression and anxiety of like, I don't even deserve to feel this way. I walk alongside people who have real trauma and real tragedy in their lives, and I have this salaried position where like, now I feel even worse because I feel bad about myself. And so there's just this, there's the imposter syndrome just goes lower and lower and lower and deeper and deeper and deeper. And the problem is we don't have the tools because we were never given the tools on how to get out of that. Because as great as my childhood was, I wasn't given the framework on how to deal with emotional trauma or how to deal with emotional frustration. It was always, again, work harder. It was always think your way through it, don't feel your way through it, because we don't talk about feelings, right? And again, it wasn't that it was bad. It was just, it was never taught that.
So you weren't, like you said, you weren't ever given the framework.
Right.
And I think that can be just as frustrating. You know, like I say this on the podcast a lot, but my mom was married 3 times. You know, I didn't even meet my biological father until I was 30. And
Wow.
we had a brief relationship when I was 12, like for
Yeah.
like 6 months, and then we parted ways, and then we didn't actually even have a relationship till I was 30. And that's because we met by accident in a coffee shop, total accident.
Wait.
But I say
Well,
this a lot that, you know, and I think I'm speaking for a lot of men as you are as well. I was grown up with a lot of things not to do. It's like, okay, when I become a father, I know I'm not going to throw beer bottles at my kid and
yeah. Yeah.
scream profanities, right? So I know I'm
Yeah.
not going to do that. But the challenge is I don't know what good looks like. And it sounds
Yeah.
like for you, that was the same. It's like, okay, things weren't bad, right? But it was almost like I was trying to build a house with just a hammer,
Right.
right? Which is impossible. Like I need more tools. I need a better framework. I need more of a blueprint, maybe even
Yeah.
a point in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for the men and to say like I do walk alongside women as well, just primarily men, just because their conversations, the ways in which we lead that they're just bent more towards that. But they have all the frameworks to be successful in business, and they have the frameworks to work harder, and they have the frameworks to accomplish. And so all they know how to do is strive, and all they know how to do is accomplish, and all they know how to do is make themselves indispensable in the workplace. But they weren't given the frameworks on how to find fulfillment outside of the accomplishment. And so when we attach that fulfillment to a dopamine hit, right, to a neurological experience, well, then we're left always chasing, and this high isn't as good as the last, right? And we don't know how to find fulfillment in our family because it was not we weren't taught how to do that. That wasn't part of the conversation, right? We don't understand what it is to find fulfillment in the work of our hands. We don't know what it is to attach our identity to meaningful goals and experiences in the present and to a deep spiritual practice, right? Of who we are and of who we are becoming. Like it's, hey, my name's Cody. Hey, Larry, what do you do? Right? Like everything's attached to what do you do?
What do you do?
What do you do? What do you do? Not what do you love? What are you working on right now? What makes you excited? Hey, tell me about your
Exactly.
kids.
Yeah.
That's never the framework. And so we can't be surprised that we have an identity and a culture of men who are not knowing what to do with fulfillment. And so much of what I do, right, business, like I do consult a lot with organizations in helping them create robust business structures, but a lot of that, Larry, comes down to team and structure and getting cohesive with your staff and with your team and creating an infrastructure that allows them to win in other areas, because productivity in the workplace is a mirror. And productivity in the workplace is metrics and it's systems, and you can teach that. And that's simple. It's not always easy, but it's simple, right? You want to grow in business, simple. We can literally look at data. We can look at trends. We can look at marketplace. That's simple. That is very, very simple. It's us that needs recalibration, right? And so
let's talk about that. Like,
yeah,
in our last 10 minutes here, like how
please.
do we as men, fathers, husbands, we talked about imposter syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
talked about identity, we talked about adversity. So men are facing just different degrees, obviously, depending on the man who's listening to this right now, different degrees of adversity, different degrees of imposter syndrome. Some of it's severe, some of it's not. But it's all relative, and it's all relative to our perception. So what are some tools? A guy's driving right now to work, or maybe he's getting ready to get on a virtual Zoom call because of social distancing.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
either way, no matter what a guy is doing right now, listening to this show, and he's like, okay, after I listen to the show for the next 10, 15 minutes, I just learned this one or two things that I can now go do to help create a different situation depending on where my mindset is right now. Because what I can tell you is the guys who are listening are like, dude, Cody, like I'm jiving with you. I get it. Like I'm there too.
Yeah.
Now, how do I adjust?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is to take heart that you're not alone. So many times we feel like our experience is completely isolated and nobody understands, right? Or there's a shame built around your experience that I can't tell anyone because I don't deserve to feel this way. It doesn't make sense. And so first is to give yourself some grace to understand that, like, no, you're not crazy. No, this experience is felt by many men. And so one is to, again, recognize that you're not alone. Two would be to get really honest with yourself. Now, there's a difference between honesty and the truth. And we can be very, very honest with ourselves and still not be telling the truth. So one, we need to get honest with ourselves, which for me was sitting down and writing my experience out and being very honest with why I am where I am and why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. And then finding someone that I could be accountable to. So whether that be a coach, a mentor, a pastor, for me, it wasn't a pastor simply because I needed just objective truth. So I found coaches and mentors in my life that had walked through similar experiences and who spoke my language and who weren't going to try and wrap something up and we just need to pray more. Like that's true. I probably do, but don't give me that because I've been given those spiritual platitudes for far too long and we've allowed it to really sweep all of this under the rug and I'm becoming very toxic to myself and to others. So no, like I need an actual framework. So finding someone that you can share this to so they can take your honesty and then give you the truth back. So someone that you trust objectively to be able to give you truth and tactical, practical application to help you step towards a reality that you say that you want and that is healthy for you, that is healthy for your family, that is healthy for your professional experience, that connects you deeper into your own soul, into your body, into your financial experience, into your relationships. It is simple. It is simple. Do not complicate this, but it is not easy. We think that simple and easy are the same things, and they are not. They are not. If it was easy, everybody would do it. You can only be led so far as your own awareness. So there are going to be things that someone that you find in your life, again, this mentor, this coach, whoever it is going to say to you, and it's going to be very, very dissonant to you because you are not aware to it yet. When someone told me, dude, I think you might be an alcoholic. No, not me. No. I genuinely think you might be an affirmation. I think you might be addicted to affirmation. Like I think that you are a yes man. No, man, not me. I think you might be depressed. I think what you're experiencing right now, I think you're having anxiety attacks. I think you're not connected spiritually to what you're doing. I think that you're running through the motions because you know what to say and you know how to say it. And I don't think God's anywhere in this. I think this is an ego play. I think this is your ego trying to convince you that you're spiritual. No, this is all I've ever done. So there are things that are going to brush up against, hey man, I think you're being really manipulative. Hey, I think you're being borderline abusive. No, not me. No, I know what that is. I grew up with that. That's not me. Well, your actions are telling me something different. These are things that I had to confront. You're doing the same thing that you experienced growing up. But here's what you need to understand. That's all you've known. And so it's become this principle of least path. Like you're just mirroring what you've known. And so while you have to be held accountable for that, you also need to understand that you're not going to think your way into new actions. You're going to act your way into a new way of thinking. So finding someone who can not just give you pretty words, who cannot just tell you everything's going to be okay, who cannot just tell you that God still loves you and God still has a plan for you, that can hold you accountable, and then in that accountability can love you enough and care for you enough to say, now things have to change and here are the new patterns. So maybe that's journaling, but journaling with direction, not just writing, but given a framework to say, okay, when you're triggered, when you're angry, when you're depressed, when you're lonely, Here are the questions. What is real? What is really real? Right? If you could say anything right now, what would you say? Right? Okay, now let's say what is your perception of what's happening? Because typically it happens with someone else. Okay, well, what's your spouse's perception of what's happening? Can you write that out? What might they be thinking? What are your kids thinking right now? What are you modeling? What are they seeing? What's the desired outcome? What do you actually want from this? Have you actually asked yourself, what does this serve? What do you want? Now, what story gets you what you want? Does your story? Does your spouse's story? Does your neighbor's story? Your kid's story? Or this story that you've written out, is that what you actually want? Okay, well, how do you actually get that? What does that take? And then again, putting the framework to then actually you have to map out what you want. What do you actually want? What do you want life to look like, business to look like, love to look like, parenting to look like? What do you want your body to look like? Until you can map that, until you can tell me, we can't frame it out. So it's no wonder that you're walking in circles, that you're unfulfilled. You've never defined what fulfillment actually looks like outside of the construct of what somebody else told you it was. So we got to get really, really honest. And we've got to figure out where the truth is in there. Because you can't see the whole paint. You can't see the painting. You're in the frame. You can't see the label of the bottle because you're inside the bottle. So find someone on the outside.
Good stuff, man. I mean, it sounds like what you're talking about is you need a trusted board of advisors to
100%
to call you out on what they're seeing, to look at your life in a fishbowl and say, "Hey, man, here's what I'm seeing."
Yes.
Right. And I think importantly too, you touched upon it, which is really understanding the importance of having the right people who are in that circle.
Absolutely.
Because if you have the wrong people, you're going to hear things like "man up," "grow a set," which is basically, if you hear that type of advice, it's they've run out of skill sets themselves. But if they can help you identify some pitfalls, some gaps, and most importantly too, but also give you some ideas, some real respectful and heartfelt ideas on strategy, I mean, we're set up for better success and better conversations as it relates to, hey, how can I get through this adversity?
Yeah.
I mean, we can really look at those people as like our rope team, right?
Well, sure. And again, this whole idea of man up or pull your boots up by their straps, right? I mean, it really is just this idea of, hey, talking is one thing, action is another. Intention is one thing. I can intend a lot of things, but that doesn't mean I'm actually doing them. The problem is we'll start to confuse that intention with actual action. Well, I meant to call you. Well, I thought about planning a date night. Well, I thought about asking if I could pick them up from school. I did something else instead. Like, we can intend our way to thinking that we're actually doing something different. And so having that accountability for myself, like I want to be completely open in this as somebody who leads a fairly substantial community and who has found a great deal of what we would call perceived success, right? Like, I go to counseling every week. I have a therapist. I have 3 coaches in different areas of my life. I go to anger management. I have an anger management therapist. Why? Well, because of everything I've experienced, I recognized like there is a lot of frustration in me because of the ways in which I've experienced loss and trauma and tragedy, and rightfully so. Like, there's all that violence it goes somewhere. But if I'm not careful, if I don't transform the pain, I will transmit it. And so for me, recognizing like, okay, like there are some patterns and habits that are really not healthy, and couple that with my addictive tendencies, that's really not healthy. And if I'm going to lead other men, like, I need to understand that I don't know. I'm in the frame. I don't know how to do this. So let me get with people who do, people who study this professionally, people who understand, so that I can gather the frameworks and and have it in my arsenal and have it in my bag so that I can then lead more effectively and efficiently. I think those who win recognize they don't have all the answers and they're not perfect, and they align themselves with those who do. Like, this is what I need in this season. And so I'm not going to be so proud to say that, no, I can't do that because there's a stigma to that. No, I can't go to, like, I went to AA for a season, right? Like, why? Well, because I needed to understand the steps. I need to understand why I have an addictive personality in the first place. And when I was there, like, it was people who were at a very different place in their life than me, in a different level of, financial position. It was very different from me. But I recognized we are no different. I just have skill sets that I've employed that have given me the opportunity to get to where I am. And maybe I recognize some things a little bit earlier, or I will be there. Like, pride comes before the fall.
Agreed.
And I've experienced that. So now it's like, I don't care. I don't care what you think of me. I don't have a dang thing to prove to you. If I'm on a mission to just become the man that I said that I would be, then there are frameworks that I don't have that I have to seek out.
I love that, man. As we wrap up here, what is just some final advice if you could put a bow on your message to men out there who are listening? What would it be?
Yeah. Be intentional about what you consume, right? This podcast is a really great example of that. I've been a fan of yours and followed you for a number of years. It's an honor to share this conversation with you. There are a handful that I think are just so transformative. But it's one thing to listen to something; it's another thing to apply it. So be very, very mindful of what you're consuming. Consume for application. Right? Create accountability to that application, and survey your results often, right? So part of that accountability would to say, did you do the things that you said that you were going to do, right? So again, be mindful of what you're consuming, whether that be mental, spiritual, physical, right? Get really honest with yourself, and then marry that to what's actually true. Find accountability to hold you to who that you say that you want to be. Get very clear on that, right? And if there are different opportunities, Larry, I believe that you have a mastermind and you have ways in which you walk alongside men. Jumping into something like that to say, like, I don't have these frameworks. And Larry, you've had lots of conversations with lots of men, and you have gained a certain set of tools that I recognize I don't have. And if I want to go further, faster, and if I actually want to become the man that I said that I would be for myself, for my wife, even if you're single, for my kids if I have them, for my workplace, to become a better leader in my community, like, I understand that it all starts with leading myself, and what's gotten me here won't get me there. And the group of friends that I have right now, if I have friends, aren't going to get me there. So I'm going to invest in myself to say, the group of guys that you're leading, Larry, like, could I apply? I may not be a good fit. I don't know, but I'm at least going to have the gumption and the humility to apply.
Yeah. I think that, I've had a lot of conversations we have 50 coaches that work for Dad Edge.
It's amazing.
We've had, and I'm sure you can appreciate this.
Yeah.
And so I facilitate a mastermind for my coaches twice a week. And we talk about the members a lot and how to lead and, lead from the front.
Mm-hmm.
And the one message that we keep telling our leaders is your biggest battle is helping the man that you're coaching get out of the way of the man that man sees in the mirror every single morning.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the biggest battle. And the funny thing is that you mentioned that. I think this is appropriate for your community. It's appropriate for my community. It's appropriate for the listeners. It's appropriate for men to know. I can't even tell you how many applicants I've gotten that they're just like, I don't know if I'm going to be a good fit for this. And I always kind of scratch my head. I'm like, why would you think that? Oh,
Exactly.
I'm not, I'm just probably not operating
Yeah.
at the level these guys are. They're probably a bunch of ballers. I kind of laugh at that because I'm like, dude, I was like, we're 450 imperfect knuckleheads.
Yeah.
But here's the difference. We are 450 imperfect knuckleheads that are hungry to not be long-term knuckleheads. Like we're
That's it.
eager. Yeah, we're eager, we're hungry, we're open, we have emotional intelligence to learn from each other, to share our experiences, to contribute. But here's the cool thing. The more imperfect that I find, and I'm sure you see this with your community as well, the more imperfect a man is and the more authentic he is, man, the more we love him. It's like,
Absolutely.
dude, like
There's more.
how ugly
There's
can you get? Because we love you the uglier you get, right?
and there's some really beautiful transformation because when we can open up that level of humility. I mean, and you look no further. We didn't really get a chance to talk into like my walk away from faith and spirituality, and that left turn. But you have no, I mean, if even for the guys that are listening, I would assume most of them are faith based in some way, shape, or form. Like, look at scripture. Look at the disciple. Like, we're just talking the most unconventional group of just misfits that shouldn't have even been placed together. Like, there were two that were like, so, like they would have killed each other, like literally killed each other in any other circumstance, right? Yet they're brought together under this common idea that we're serving something greater. We have a legacy to live out. We're called here to bear heaven, like on earth. Like, that's a very broad, ethereal conversation to have. But okay, what does that mean? So let me step into a group where I feel like the outcast for a minute, and that's okay. And that's why I said, like, I don't even know if I would be a good fit, because I know that's the conversation psychologically going on in a man's head right now. And so it's not a question of whether you will be accepted. The question is, will you accept being accepted?
Dang, man. That's a really good point. And to be honest with you, a point that I've never even really considered until now, doing this work for 5 years, facilitating our mastermind. But that's a really good point. I think that's like maybe 1/3 of the battle. The 1/3 of the battle is, can I accept myself? Can I accept the fact that other people can look at my particular situation and give me advice? Do I have the humility for that? And am I accepting of people being accepting of me being imperfect and flawed and all that good stuff? Just accepting me for who I am, because it goes back to that number one fear of, am I enough? And exactly, you mentioned that already. Am I enough? Am I good
Yeah.
enough?
Yeah.
That's number one fear of us men, of us human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I love that. Dude, this has been amazing stuff, and I have thoroughly enjoyed this. And to be honest with you, man, I didn't know a lot of your adversity and a lot of your story because I've been following you on social media for quite some time, and I'm like, Cody Jefferson always balling. Like, this guy is just on top of the world, never has a bad day.
No.
Right? So
No,
it's
and
good.
I share about a lot of that experience. I think it's important. But now that you're telling me that, that's really great feedback that I need to share even more, right? Like, so I take that and I hear that. I'm like, really? You didn't know some of this? Like, that means that I need to be more vocal about my experience, right? So I thank you.
Yeah, man. I always see Cody, with the leather jackets, tattoos, perfect hair, white teeth, like just like, yeah, man, I'm living life. So it's awesome to hear like this amazing human side of you. And this is the cool thing I love about podcasting,
Yeah.
because I just had Andy Frisella on 2 weeks ago, and I shared in that particular in the intro of that episode, I was just like, because do you know who Andy is?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Some people. I live in St. Louis. He lives here in St. Louis, and most people are like,
Yeah.
"Who's that?" I'm like, "Really? These First Form. Come on, supplement
Yeah.
superstores. They're
Yeah.
everywhere." And you know, before Andy came on the show, I was just like, I think I'm gonna get the Andy Frisella that's like, bruh, go out, kick ass,
Yeah.
and
75 hard.
75 hard, right? And here was the cool thing about that interview, and the funny thing is that I prayed before that interview,
Yeah.
and I got to see this amazing human, authentic side to him that no one gets to see. And just like you, right? I mean, because
Yeah.
I compare you and him because, like, if you look at your stuff on social media, I'm like, oh, this guy probably never has a bad day,
Mm.
right? Andy never has a bad day. He's the strongest individual in the world. And on that podcast, Andy shared, I am a weak human being. Like, literally his words, I'm a weak human being with no willpower. I've just learned the skill of discipline. That's the only difference.
Yeah.
And he admitted a couple other things on that show too, and I was blown away by that.
Wow.
And just like you, right? I mean, like, I expected authenticity out of you, but I didn't expect all this. So this has been game changing. And I think the more authentic we are, and by the way, guys, if you're considering like our community, like our mastermind, right? Like, what kind of guys are in there? They're guys just like Cody. They're guys just like us, to where, like, hey man, I have good days, but here are some demons and here are some bad days, which, by the
Yeah.
way, we all carry, right? So I love your message, man. I love what you're doing. And I want to make sure all the guys can find you and all the great things you're doing. So
Yeah.
where can the guys connect with you?
I mean, so I'm on every social platform, just Cody Jefferson. Fairly approachable guy. Like, you can shoot me a message anytime. I would love it if this has been useful to you or meaningful to you. Like, shoot me a message. Let me know what the biggest takeaway was for you. I would love to hear that. You know, I say that I'm in the business of helping people tell better stories, but that only happens when I know yours. So outside of that, you can find me at www.codyjefferson.com. It's difficult.
What's
And
this
so,
WW all about?
I don't know why I still say that. But yeah, you can find me at codyjefferson.com. Would love to connect. You know, we have a community online called Embrace the Lion. You can find it under groups. There's about 4,500 guys. Again, all committed to the same conversation. A lot of really amazing blue collar, some white collar guys just doing their best to move the needle forward in life and business and love and faith. And so,
Love what you're doing, man.
thanks, brother.
And by the way, this is like totally minor, but I figured I'd throw this in at the end. Major props to you and respect for playing guitar. I've been playing for 9 months,
Yeah.
and I finally learned my first song all the way
Okay.
through. It took 9 months, like, to
What's
learn
the song?
Every Rose Has Its Thorn.
Oh, of
But
course you did.
yeah,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
it's like what, 4 chords, like,
Yeah.
just, got to get the rhythm
Uh-huh.
down. And right
Yeah.
now, but I'm just like, I have mad respect for anybody who can play guitar, instruments, really, right? But
Yeah.
guitar, I'm just like, I was telling my instructor, I'm like, dude, I literally feel like the most uncoordinated person on the planet trying to learn this instrument with six
Yeah.
strings on it. So, Matt, if you can sing and play and all that good stuff,
Yeah.
I mean, like, to you, I sit back and I even listen to music now, and I watch people play, and I'm like, I have so much more respect. I'm blown away because people like you, man, you guys make it look so easy.
I mean, I've been playing since I started piano lessons at 8, did that all the way up through like undergrad stuff. Picked up guitar when I was in 8th grade, and it was genuinely because I got made I still played piano. I still play piano now. Like, I sing from piano. I love piano. I compose usually on piano. But in a small town where football is life, it's varsity blues. Like, and you're not. I mean, I wrestled. Like, and I help coach high school wrestling now. And piano wasn't like the cool thing. So I picked up guitar because it was like, girls like guitar players. And this is actually easier than piano. This is so much easier because it's just a grid. And so I picked it up relatively quickly. And but it was straight up for the ladies. So are you
I hear
so
you,
you
man.
play electric? I see it behind you.
Yeah, I got a Fender Stratocaster.
Dude,
I do have electric. Do you want to know why I play electric though?
easier on your fingers?
Easier completely and totally. So, like, I brought in an acoustic guitar,
Yeah.
And I swear, I think my first instructor was like ready to just give up on me. He's like, dude, you're just not fun to teach. Okay. You suck. All right. Go find something else. Right.
Yeah.
Like that was like the attitude I was feeling from this guy.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it. I was like, dude, I'm gonna give this one more lesson, see if I can get this. And I was trying to play this acoustic guitar, and I'm like, and he's like, you know what, man? He's like, tell you what, try mine. Takes off his Fender Stratocaster. And I was like, well, I didn't even know what a Fender was. I'm just like, he's like, try this, see if it's any easier. And I started playing. And I was like, oh my gosh, this guitar is
opened.
I know, it's like this guitar is so forgiving and easier. And so I bit the bullet, man. I bought one, and I haven't looked back. And I do like it.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's super. I have a lesson every Friday, and it's just super humbling. Like, but here's the cool thing, and this is what I'll share, getting back to like our message, right? And helping men get out of their comfort zone. I can't remember what mentor told me this, but he said, always live within your strengths, but at the same time, do something and allow yourself to suck at something.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, man, that's really good advice. Like, allow yourself to suck at something for a while, because it keeps you humble. And I swear, man, like I always tell my instructor, I was like, I feel like I'm using parts of my brain that I never use. Like it's literally like, I don't even know how to compute what you're saying to me, so I have to figure it out. So it's helping. I literally think it's helped me in several different ways be more creative with content, because it's that more creative part of your brain. It's helped me, I think through things a little bit better. It's just helped me use, I think, part of my brain that I just never really used in the past.
Oh, and I think that's so important. They always say, the skills, like hobbies, have one to make money, have one to, I forget. I don't know. I'm gonna go Biden on it right now. Just forget. I probably can't say that. At any rate, anytime I'm working with a guy, and part of our framework is, what is something that you've always wanted to do, but you've never done it because you feel like there's no time, or because you feel like the learning curve is too high. And it's interesting that guitar is one of the primary things that so many men want to do. It's part of the reason I have them hanging up. Well, I mean, granted, again, I've done this professionally, but just to show, hey, yeah, I'm 36, and yes, I run successful businesses, but you'll literally find me either hanging out with my kids or doing something fun, but playing guitar. I play for an hour to an hour and a half every day. And or I'm out in my garage wrenching on bikes. Like, most of my Instagram feed is full of just garage pics that I'm sure people are like, is he a mechanic? What? I mean, yes, I am. Was he a coach? Yes, I am. Right? Is he like, what? I'm all those things. Right? People ask me like, dude, you make money. Why don't you buy like a new motorcycle? Like, why do you have all these old trashy Harleys? And I'm like, what am I going to do with a new one? Like, just ride it and put tinsel on it? Like, I need to be able to get in there and work on it. This is cathartic for me. I don't buy it for flash. Like, I need things that make me come alive and give me fulfillment, regardless of what you think about it. And also, who doesn't want to have a garage full of old motorcycles they can work on? Come on.
You're talking to the guy who's dangerous with tools, so that would probably be me. But
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, it's fair. Well, Cody, man, I enjoyed this immensely. This was great. Hey, for you guys who want to connect with Cody, who want to obviously know more about our mastermind program, as well as be a part of our free Facebook group, to where, like Cody said, join the conversation based on what you've heard here today, as well as all of our podcasts we've ever done. For this particular show, you can go to gooddadproject.com/293 for this show. Again, gooddadproject.com/293. Cody, thank you so much for coming on, man. This was great.
Brother, honor to serve you and your brotherhood. Thank you.
Back at you. Gentlemen, as you listen to this, we only have 4 more weeks left in the year. So I know 2020 has been probably hell on earth for you, as well as many of us. However, what I want you to do is go out and live legendary, because legacy is forever. Take care.